Welcome to the Ironwood Gym. Today we're going to go over good mornings, or good morning. I don't know how true it is, but from the stories that I've heard is that the good morning, the exercise, actually got its name from well back into European times when you would greet someone on the street and you would bend at the hips and greet them with good morning. I used to liken it as when you get out of bed the next day, after doing good mornings on Monday, you get out of bed on Tuesday and it's, oh, good morning. Either way, I think the first one probably has more credibility, but the second one is definitely true because the good morning is meant to strengthen the low back, the glutes, and the hamstrings. And in my mind, from having done a lot of good mornings, the hamstrings are the primary muscle group that you're doing that work with. So and a lot of times due to the nature of how you're doing it and getting that stretch in your hamstrings, you're going to feel good mornings. You're going to feel that stretch, and then you'll feel the soreness the next day. So today what I want to do is I've had a number of videos come out recently about the posterior chain. And so I went over all of that as far as what the posterior chain is and why these exercises are important. And the good mornings are definitely one of your top builders of the entire posterior chain. I feel the RDL / stiff leg deadlift is better for reasons which I won't go into in the good morning video, but I will later on in a video on RDLs. But I feel that the good morning is probably the next best developer of the entire posterior chain. When you start getting into the other exercises such as reverse hypers, glute ham raises, they definitely do not isolate individual muscle groups, but they specialize in certain areas. So the good morning is hitting everything. You know, it's hitting the hamstrings very hard, it's hitting the glutes very hard, and it's hitting the low back very hard. So it's definitely up there as far as posterior chain development and the importance of how important it is in developing the posterior chain. So today I'm going to look at the good morning, the technique of the good morning, what you should be focusing on, what you should probably not be focusing on or trying to get out of your head. And we're going to go into some different variations of the good morning. And I could probably do just a video on each different variation, but I kind of want to put everything all together and say this is the good morning. All right, and this is the world of the good morning. And I'm certainly not going to cover everything. There's going to be some things that I leave out intentionally. I don't think this is going to be the final conclusive piece of good mornings, but I want it to be it's not going to be an authoritative piece on good mornings, but it's going to be a very good, well-rounded approach and give you some new tools for your toolbox, as well as going over those safety tips that I had mentioned. So first thing is, I got asked numerous times whenever I was coaching at the college level, I would demonstrate the good morning. And the first thing, probably every single year that I demonstrated the good morning, the first comment that I would hear would be, is that okay for your back? Is that bad for your back? Well, if you do it wrong, yes it is. But if you do it correctly and you focus on moving your body the way it's supposed to be moved, then there's really no big safety concern that you need to be aware of. For the good morning, we need to look at it as a hinge type of movement. That is the kind of the catchphrase that's caught on the last few years, and certainly so that good morning should be a hinge. So when you're doing a good morning, you're not just bending at the back, you're not lowering yourself from the back, and I know you can't see everything perfectly well right there, but you're going to think of it more as you're pushing your hips back your legs are essentially the wall, and your upper body is the door. So right now the door is closed. As I push my hips back, I'm opening the door, but I'm not bending the door. I'm not bending the wall. I'm hinging. All right, I'm hinging my hips from my hips. As I push my hips back, my torso comes down. All right, don't think about it as going forward. It's another thing that I saw many times. People would walk the bar out. Most people walk the bar out too far, even in the squat. For a squat, they might take 1, 2, small, 3, 4 steps back from the rack and then do their squat from there because they don't want to be too close to the rack. Well, in reality, you just need 1 step with each foot and you're good. The good morning is really no different, all right? You're not bending forward, all right? So you don't need to be a mile away from the rack because you think you're going to bend forward into the rack. 1 step on each side. If you really need it for comfort, maybe another half a step on each side, and you will be plenty far away from the rack, because when you watch the path of a good morning, the bar path, it does go forward a little bit. Okay, so if I'm facing the rack here, as I push my hips back, yes, the bar is coming forward a little bit, but it's really not that much. Okay, it's not going to be that much because your hips are going back at the same time. So as my hips go back, my torso is coming down, all right, because it's just a hinge. My hips go back, my chest and shoulders and bar come down, all right? So your setup with that in mind is really not that different from a squat. It really shouldn't be different from a squat. I'm going to set the bar, I'll get into bar placement here in a minute, but I'm going to set the bar on my back. I'm going to brace just like I would for a squat. I'm going to brace my abs. I'm going to pull my lats down hard. I'm going to walk the bar, take the bar out of the rack. I'm going to walk back up 1.5 steps, 1 to 2 steps at most, but probably 1.5 steps back from the rack. And then I'm ready to do my good mornings. When I finish the set, I walk in the same as a squat. All right, no difference there. For your good mornings, I'm going to demonstrate with a high bar position first. And that's typically how I do my good mornings. Even though when I squat, I use a low bar. I actually use a kind of a pseudo low bar position. I don't move it. It's not a true low bar like a lot of kind of your old time powerlifters like to have it way down on their shoulders or way down on their back. I'm kind of in between a high bar and a low bar position. That's a groove that works best for me. But when I do my good mornings, most of the time, I'm going to take a high bar position. Okay, meaning I'm going to place it up high on my traps. And you probably won't be able to see this from the side angle that I have right now, but I'll use a high bar position to start with. You can do it with a low bar position. There's nothing wrong with that. One of the things that I take into consideration when I'm doing a good morning is that I want to increase the length of the lever. The length of the lever is the distance from my hips, the pivot point in my hips, to the bar position. Okay? And small differences, small little changes in that lever will make a big difference. So if I move the bar up to a high bar position, that's going to place a lot more stress on the muscles of my low back and on my hamstrings, because now my lever is longer and it's going to take more force to bring that back up. With the low bar position, you can certainly do it that way, but you're going to shorten the lever. Therefore, it's not going to be as difficult to do the exercise. Therefore, you can utilize more weight. And if you utilize more weight, are you actually getting stronger? Maybe, maybe not. That'd be a kind of a debate to have, because one way you're putting yourself at a disadvantage with the high bar position. So you're going to be utilizing less weight, but you're going to be working from a disadvantageous state, meaning you increase the lever arm, making the exercise more difficult. If you move the bar to a low bar position, you have a more advantageous position to work from, meaning you can utilize more weight, but you're taking away the difficulty of the exercise. And that could be a debate that's maybe you want to do both. You can have that debate of whether which one's better or worse, or better for improving your deadlift or your squat, or increasing hamstring strength, glute strength, low back strength. But that's really the differences, and I can't tell you which one is actually going to be better. Low bar is you're going to be able to handle more weight. High bar, increased difficulty, meaning more force produced with less weight. But the movement is basically the same for either one. When I do the movement, okay, my back should be locked in. I wouldn't want to see someone rounding their spine as they're doing their good morning. They shouldn't see them rounding their back. And I probably have a little bit of round to my upper back, my mid to upper back, just because of flexibility limitations that I have. But if you look at my low back is locked in. You really want your upper back to be locked in too. But that's not quite as critical as the low back. So I want everything, I'm going to brace everything, I'm going to pull everything tight. I'm going to bend from the hips, okay, keeping everything locked in. I'm rotating my hips. As I push my hips back, think of my hips rotating. And when I start to come up, I'm not just pushing with my low back. My low back and upper back should still be locked in, and then I rotate my hips. Okay, think about utilizing your glutes to do that movement. Your glutes need to rotate your pelvis. So as I go down, my pelvis is rotating. As I come back up, my pelvis rotates forward to reverse that action. Also, as I'm going down, I like to think about there being a rubber band or a string running from above my glutes, around my glutes, down my hamstrings, basically all the way to my knee. And as I'm going down, I'm trying to stretch that rubber band. Okay? I'm stretching that rubber band. I feel the tension. I'm actually trying to feel that tension in that rubber band that's running along the back side of my posterior chain, my glutes and my hamstrings. I'm feeling that tension. And then when I come up, I utilize all of that tension, okay, to contract, pulling on my hamstrings, pulling my glutes, letting my glutes rotate my hips to come back up and reverse the movement. My low back is solely meant to lock my spine in place. I'm not trying to do movement with my low back. All right, and my low back is working very hard, and it's working very hard to stabilize the position that I want my spine held in. The movement is created by my hamstrings and glutes. So I'm going to push back into that rubber band. My hips are rotating backwards. I'm pushing back into that rubber band. It's getting tighter and tighter and tighter. And then I rotate my hips and pull on that rubber band with my hamstrings to come back up. Okay? So let's get in. I'm going to do a few reps with the bar. Again, I'm going to need to hit one more thing here. Stance width. You can use different stance widths. Most of the time, for me, I'm going to go with a close stance. And a close stance for me is the outside of my feet are actually going to be inside the width of my shoulders. So I use a fairly close stance to do good mornings with. Wide stance good mornings can be good. They are a good exercise, and I will demonstrate wide stance good mornings. I got away from them many years ago because of injury issues, and I haven't put them back in. So maybe that's something that I need to work at doing, is working back into the wide stance good morning. But most of the time right now, what I do is a close stance. Okay, one more thing on back position. So I'm kind of all over the place a little bit right here. One more thing on back position. So when I'm bracing, I'm getting set underneath the bar. I'm not trying to have this big, super arched, tight back, right? I want to brace and lock everything down tight. Okay, that's actually going to allow me to utilize my abs and utilize my abs to stabilize my spine. If I'm overarched, okay, I cannot contract my abs. I can try to tighten them up, but it's not going to be very effective. When I brace, I'm going to push out against my abdominal wall. I'm going to push out, and I'm going to crunch everything down. I'm going to crunch my abs down tight. So this would be my position that I'm working from here. Okay, not overarched. Crunch everything, crunch down, push back into the hips, rotate the hips to come forward. And then the final thing I'm going to talk about before I jump in here, and you can't really see it on the video right there, maybe if I back up a little bit, is your knees. You are not trying to bend your knees. You're not bending your knees. All right, but you are going to have flex in your knees. And for some people, it may help out to start with a flex knee position and then work from your hips there. I like to start generally fairly straight in my knees, but then as I push my hips back, I do get a flex in my knees, but I'm not going to let myself bend. Okay, and it's a hard thing for me to kind of explain. I have a flex in my knees, I'm not going to bend my knees. If I bend my knees and my knees start to move forward, I am decreasing the amount of tension that's on my hamstrings and decreasing the effectiveness of the exercise. My entire intent should be pushing my hips backwards. Okay, some people can have very straight legs. I do want you to push your hips back instead of being straight up and down. The more straight up and down you are, straight legs, straight up and down you are, the more tension that you're gonna put a lot more negative stress on your spine, because you're gonna be leaning forward with the bar in front of your feet, which you don't want, okay? So really the bar should probably travel probably over your toes, okay, about. So as you sit your hips back, again, the bar is gonna be mostly going down, but it's probably gonna travel forward a little bit. My guess is probably around your toe, not in front of your toes. All right, so let's get into doing the good morning. Again, when I set up here, I'm gonna set up like I squat, and I'm gonna start with a high bar position, okay? So, I'm gonna get in, I'm gonna rotate underneath the bar, high bar position, I'm locking my traps in. Now I'm gonna crunch my abs down and brace my abs. And from there, everything's locked in, my lats are locked in, my abs locked in. I'm gonna stand up with the bar and back up. Again, I took one step on each foot. My abs stay braced. I'm gonna push back into my hips, lowering the bar, and then I rotate my hips to come up, pushing back into that rubber band. Here's 2 more reps. And you can see I only have to take 1 step forward and I'm in the wrap. There's no need for me to be way back here trying to do my good mornings, okay? Just 1 step out each foot, you'll be fine. So that's your basic high bar good morning. My stance was inside my shoulder width. I'm not trying to get super wide. I want to show, I think I'll show it from a different angle, okay? But that's your basic good morning right there. And every variation that you do for a good morning is going to be built off of that. All right, it's going to be built off of that, your regular, just basic good morning that I just went over. So it doesn't matter if you're using a specialty bar, it doesn't matter if you're changing your stance width, if you're doing it off chains or pins or whatever, everything's going to stem from that basic technique that I just went over. The next thing, before I start changing camera angles and going into these variations, the next thing I want you to understand is that you don't have to get perfectly parallel to the floor. Some people can do that. If you have great flexibility, some athletes have really good flexibility, so it's not that hard to get parallel to the floor for them. but it's really not that critical. If you're pushing your hips back and you're getting that good stretch in your hamstrings, as long as you're not, I mean, you shouldn't be doing this, all right? But if you're getting a good flex in that, you don't have to be all the way down. I don't even know if I'm there right there, but you don't have to be all the way down parallel to the floor. You can be a little bit above parallel. The key is getting that stretch in the hamstrings. Make sure you're creating tension in your hamstrings and your hips, and keeping your back locked in. A lot of people, when they try to get that extra lower down to parallel, and I've even seen a few people go below parallel, in trying to do that, they're actually letting their back round. So that would really defeat, it would create safety issues or injury risk issues that we want to avoid. So let me move the camera. Okay, I'm going to go directly from behind so you can see a low bar and a high bar, and also I'll do the wide stance version from there, and then I'll get into some other variations. All right, so we're going to look at the high bar and low bar positions here directly from behind because I don't think you can see it that well from the side. Maybe you can, but I'm going to show it from behind. And I realize I have the camera set right now that you can't really see my feet, but you can kind of see where my legs are going down at, and that should give you an idea of how close my stance is. So the first one, I'll do what I just did. I'm going to show the high bar good morning, and then I'll do a couple reps there, and then I'll do the low bar after that. So again, I'm going to set up just like I would for my squat. I'm going to rotate underneath the bar, tighten up my traps first, pull my shoulder blades down. Then I'm going to crunch my abs down, tighten up my lats, back the bar out, one step on each foot. I'm going to push my hips back. This is the high bar position. There's 3 reps with that high bar position. Everything else, you know, is basically the same. I'm creating as much tension as I can from my traps all the way to my low back to lock in my spine. Okay, so my spine, there's no movement in my spine. That's going to involve everything. It's going to involve my traps. It's going to involve my lats, my low back, my abs, all working together to lock everything in. Now, I'm going to move that bar down to my low bar position. Again, I'm not a super low bar squatter, so it's kind of a pseudo low bar position, but it is lower, and it does actually make a pretty considerable difference when you're doing your good mornings. So for me, when I do this, I do have to move my grip out just a little bit. Everything else stays the same. I'm still going to rotate underneath the bar. Now I'm going to set the bar into that groove, tighten up my traps, pull my shoulder blades down, squeeze my abs, lock them in, brace, lats pulled down, one step on each foot. Okay, and there's the low bar position. I'm going to demonstrate the wide stance. Good morning. My mechanics are basically going to be the same. The biggest difference is I'm going to take a wide stance. I'm going to angle my feet out just a little bit. But everything from my back perspective, as far as getting everything locked in, my traps, my lats, my abs, crunching everything down tight and bracing, that's going to be the same. My hips are still going to be pushed back. Now with the wide stance, I may actually develop a little bit more flex in my knee. That's okay. It's still, We don't want to start turning it into a squat by letting that knee bend. All right, we're still gonna just push the hips back and have flex in the knee, not let the knee bend and let the knee start to travel forward. Even if the knee travels forward just a little bit, we're taking tension off the hamstrings, which is decreasing the effectiveness of the exercise. So, maybe 1 second, we're gonna switch the camera angle, or move the camera back a little bit, and we're gonna check out that wide stance. All right, so a little bit further away now. That's what we have to do for the camera to get this wide stance in there. So I'm gonna step out this, and I'm gonna set up into my normal stance first. So now that you can see my feet when I have the bar on my back, I'm gonna show you kind of how wide they actually are or aren't. And then I'm gonna move out to my wider stance so you can see really how wide I am, and then I'll get another shot from the side so you can see the mechanics with that wide stance as well from over there. All right, so again, have to keep emphasizing this. I'm going to go back to my high bar position. Okay, I'm going to go back to my high bar position, and I'm going to emphasize again, because I don't think you can overemphasize it, my setup all the way through. Again, walk out to that narrow stance first. Okay, so take my grip on the bar, I'm going to rotate underneath. I'm going to pull my traps down first, locate the bar, pull my traps down, my shoulder blades should be pulled down tight. And then I'm going to brace my abs and pull my lats down tight. 1 step on each foot. And that is my regular stance for good mornings. Okay, now I'm going to move it out. I'm going to have my toes out to the side just a little bit. My toes are angled out. I'm going to stay braced. I'm going to push back into my hips, bend from the hips with flex in the knees. Okay. Okay, so that's that wide stance. Really, with the wide stance, you're definitely going to be hitting your hamstrings harder. Okay, you're going to create a lot more tension in those hamstrings, but it's also going to put more tension on your hips, which is why I stopped doing them in the first place due to injury issues. I don't have those issues anymore. I'll probably try to work these back in pretty soon. But it is something that you should be aware of, is that it is going to create more tension in your hips. Okay, right in through here. You're going to create more tension in your hips. At the same time, and this is the good thing about it, it's creating a lot more tension in your hamstrings as you push back. Might not quite have the same range of motion. I may be a little bit shy on the range of motion because I'm creating a lot more tension in those hamstrings, but it's going to have a very positive effect as far as building the hamstrings and strengthening the hamstrings. So let me switch the camera angle. I'll be right back and we'll look at it from the side. All right, now we're going to go back to that wide stance squat. Okay, I'm going to show it from the side. Again, just watch my hips, watch my knee position and the flex in my knees, and watch my range of motion. As I should probably be getting, because I have a pretty tight hamstrings, my range of motion probably isn't as good. I'm probably not coming down as far. But I'm still creating a lot of tension in my hamstrings as they're stretching, meaning they're going to have to contract a lot harder as I come up. Okay. So again, I'll do the high bar position. I'm going to take the bar out just like normal, rotate underneath the bar, tighten up my traps, squeeze my abs, crunch my abs down, brace my abs, pull my lats down hard. Step back, 1 step on each foot. Now I have my wide stance. My toes are angled out slightly. Again, push back into my hips. Little knee flexion. I should have a lot of tension created in those hamstrings. All right, now we're going to couple different variations of good mornings, and there's a lot more options available than what I'm going to go over, but I think these variations I'm going to go over are probably the better ones or I don't even know if I want to say better. There are a lot of options out there, but if you get the basics, if you understand the basics, it's easier to apply. So if I'm using one specialty bar, switching to another specialty bar isn't going to be that big of a stretch for you to figure out. If I'm utilizing this variation right here that I'm getting ready to show, you can certainly add a specialty bar into that, okay? But this right here, this is called the pin good morning or the rack good morning. You could also do this with chains attached to the top of the rack. I haven't done this in a long time, but I attach chains to the top of the rack and they would actually hold the bar in this set position. So when it's coming off the chains or off these safety pins or racks, it's essentially what a lot of people refer to as a concentric good morning, meaning you're only performing the concentric part of the lift. Now, to me, the way I apply it and the way I feel it should be applied is you're still going to have an eccentric part of the lift. Because for be concentric only, meaning once you get to the top, you're basically just going to drop it back down. And I don't want you to do that. All right, that's not a good habit to get into. And I know a lot of people do that when they're utilizing the chains, but don't get into that habit. Think of it more as concentric first. So instead of having that eccentric where you're lowering the bar first, you're actually going to start with the bar on the chain or in the chains or on the safety pins. And you're going to do your concentric first, and then you're going to follow that with the eccentric. Your basic mechanics of the good morning are the same. That's not going to change, but you're not going to be able to set up with the bar and the J hooks like you do for a squat and get everything the way you want it. You're going to have to do it in a very imperfect world, if you will. Okay, you're going to have to get under the bar as it's set on the safety pins from that height, meaning it's going to be much more difficult to get locked into position. So actually, as I'm demonstrating, I'm not going to talk you through it on this because it's going to take a lot of effort for me to actually get into position. But once you're in position, you're not squatting the bar up. And that's where a lot of people will start to do, because they may have their knees a little bit bent, a little bit too much flex when they're getting into position, and then they'll start to squat the bar up. That's not what we want to do. We want our hips back behind us, and we want to good morning that bar up. We're still thinking that we're on that lever. We're still utilizing that lever system, just like a good morning or a hinge, where you're bringing the good morning up here versus standing up. All right, we're not going to stand up. We're going to hinge up. When you're setting this height, okay, you can essentially set it at anything. The lower it is, obviously, the more difficult the exercise is going to be. But also, the lower it is, the harder it's going to be to get set in the correct position. All right. So really, for me personally, I don't like to go any lower than belly button height. All right. So the bar set at my belly button, and this one right here is just slightly above my belly button. If I went down to the next pin spacing, I would be definitely below my belly button, and it would become very, very difficult to get into proper position. From that belly button position, I may go one notch higher. I don't see the point for me going much higher than that. Again, remember, I'm already just slightly above my belly button. So if I go up one, now I'm definitely 3 inches above, 4 inches above. If I go up two, that's another 3 inches. So I'm really starting to increase that height. And I don't feel going higher, continuously going higher is going to benefit me. I'll handle more weight, but is that going to carry over to getting the strength that I need to improve my squat or my deadlift or to increase my hamstring strength if I'm thinking sprinting or anything like that. So you do want to still have a decent range of motion. All right, so I'm going to demonstrate this. Again, I'm not going to talk you through it. So I'm going to take my grip. I'm not going to talk you through it as I do it. So, but I'm going to get my grip set. I'm going to get one foot set underneath the bar, and then I'm going to bring my other foot forward. As soon as I'm there, I'm basically going to start. Okay. But getting into that position, I have my grip set. Let me do it from over here. I'm going to get my grip set first. Okay, I'm going to walk up to the bar. The bar right now is basically over the tips of my toes. Okay, that's where I want the bar to be. I'm going to get my grip set. I'm going to pull one foot back, and then I'm going to pull my back into position with my shoulder blades pulled down. I'm bracing my abs. I'm pulling my lats down, my traps. I'm going to do that all at once as I'm getting underneath the bar, which is kind of difficult to do, and which is why I'm not going to talk you through it. And then as I'm doing that, I'm bringing my other foot underneath the bar. Now both feet are set. As soon as I'm there and locked in, I'm going to stand up with my good morning. All right. All right, so everything's set. And as you can see, after I get that first rep in, it's much easier to stay in position, and the rest of my reps probably looked a lot better. But getting into position for that first rep is the challenging part. Once you have that in, then I'll do my reps. This is, and I'll talk about programming a little bit more later, but this is the only variation of good morning which I will do heavy singles in. And that's your chain suspended good morning or your pin good morning, rack good morning, whatever you want to call it. Because of the nature of it being a set position and being concentric only, I will do singles sometimes, heavy singles, like max effort singles, from these positions. I don't do that usually for my other good morning variations. Generally, heavy sets of 5 is as heavy as I get. Sometimes I'll go to heavy triples, but I never do singles on any other good morning variation, only when I'm doing the concentric first variations. All right, so a couple things I wanted to touch on those rack good mornings or the pin good mornings is, one, I utilize a low bar position when I do those styles of good mornings. And the reason why is I need to move my hands out wider so I can get underneath the bar easier. When I do that, it feels better to me if I just move the bar down to that, or I get locked into that low bar position. You can certainly do it with a high bar position. Just for my preference and comfort getting into that position to do the good morning from, it just works out better for me to do it from a low bar position. You could also do wide stance. I was doing it with a closer stance, but you could also do the wide stance variation with that very well. It would be a very good exercise, especially if you're trying to improve your sumo deadlift. I definitely would recommend doing a wide stance concentric first good morning, whether it be out of chains or off the safety racks, is definitely a good option. The last thing I want to mention about those concentric first good mornings is the chain suspended good mornings and why I don't like that exercise. I actually do like the exercise. I think it's a great option. It does give you a little bit more freedom because the bar can now move. If you're hanging chains from the top of the rack, the bar is sitting in the chains, the bar can move. So it's a little bit easier to get into position. It allows you a little bit more freedom. versus when it's on the safety pins, it is in a fixed position, it's not gonna move, and you have to adjust your body to that bar. Now, what I don't like about the chain suspended good morning is that when I used to do them, and I would be lifting with someone, I'm such a competitive person that if we're doing max effort work, or even if we're doing heavy sets of triples or sets of 5, it didn't matter. My goal was to beat them. So when you have the chain suspended good morning, it becomes easy. If you learn how to do, not the right way, if you learn how to do it in a certain manner, by creating, you push forward just a little bit and then kind of let the bar drift back, or push forward and then kind of pull it back as you're pulling into position, pulling your hips into position, it actually makes it a lot easier. And you begin to utilize the momentum of the bar and the weight to do that good morning. Well, I would do that to cheat and to win. And so, but at the same point, and when I'm doing that, when I'm cheating, I'm not getting as much out of the exercise. And so even if you're training by yourself, or if you're not trying to beat someone, just to get a heavier lift and feel like you won the day because you had a bigger number, you're defeating the purpose of what you're trying to get out of the exercise. So for that reason, I don't like the chain suspended good morning. It is a great exercise. You just need to be disciplined enough to stay strict and do it the right way every time you do it. Okay, so moving on, I've got the safety squat bar in the rack, and I guess you can't hardly tell with the plate on the bar, but the safety squat bar is in the rack, and nothing really is going to change as far as the overall good morning technique. But what's going to be different is the camber on the safety squat bar, and actually let's just try to move this right now. Let's see if we can do it from over here. Okay, so now you can see that I have a safety squat bar in the rack, and the bigger difference with this is you want your mechanics to be the same, but it's going to cause your mid to upper back to start to break, because the camber on the bar, okay, puts the bar lower and in front. All right, which means your back has to be a lot stronger to maintain proper position, because now the bar is not sitting up and behind you, it's sitting down and in front of you. Okay, so your back has to be a lot stronger to resist that weight from pulling you forward. And you may not see it, but once you do it, you will feel that difference. And I absolutely hate this exercise. It is probably the most, if not one of the most, it may be the most hated exercise that I do. I absolutely hate it. It feels like death. It makes me feel weak. And yeah, but it's a great exercise. It will help you get stronger. So it is a little bit more difficult to get set and maintain that, because now I don't have the bar up here to pull down and create pressure with. I'm going to be doing it. I'm going to keep my hands on the handles of the safety squat bar, and I'm not going to try to lift up. I'm not going to push it up to get the bar in better position. I'm going to keep the bar where it's at and do all the work with my hamstrings, glutes, and my low and upper back is going to play a much bigger role into maintaining proper position. So I get set underneath here. I actually like to pull it back a little bit to get set, and then I rotate forward to exactly where I want it. I'm still going to pinch my shoulder blades together tight. I'm still going to lock my abs down, crunch my abs down, okay? But I'm not going to really be able to get as tight as I can with the regular bar. I still have the same intention, it's just going to be more difficult to do. From here, it's a good morning. Push my hips back, flexing the knees, brace, use my hips to come up. Okay, and basically from about right here where my hand is up has to be tremendously stronger to resist breaking as I'm doing the exercise. There are other specialty bars you can use. There's the rackable or the cambered squat bar, there's the buffalo bar, there's the Mars bar. They're all great variations of the good morning. Okay, this is what I have here, the safety squat bar, and it's a great variation, but I still hate it. Definitely not a fun exercise to go through when you're really trying to push yourself heavy. Got one more variation, and you can still do with the safety squat bar, everything that I've went over so far still applies. Okay, I can still do a wide stance. I can still do my narrow stance. I can put the safety pins down. I can do it off the safety pins for a concentric first. I can do it out of chains. Okay, where you have the chain suspended good mornings, where you have the chains attached to the top of the rack and the bars sitting in the chains. So all of that still applies. I can still do every bit of that with the safety squat bar. Gonna go over one more variation. Let me get that set up, and then we'll cap it off by going over some programming stuff that's important to know for the good morning. All right, this is gonna be the last variation that I go over for the good morning. And this exercise, I like it. I think it's a great exercise. I think it can be a little risky depending upon your flexibility level, depending upon your strength level. I don't think people that are really weak in the abs and the low back, it's probably not the best exercise to start them out with. You need to build that strength up first. If they do not have adequate hamstring flexibility, you may want to avoid this exercise. I think that poses too many risks, and I have very tight hamstrings, and it's probably going to show up here when I demonstrate it. But I do think as the tighter your hamstrings are, the more the risk goes up for you hurting your low back. I think if you can't maintain proper position through your abs, through your low back, even through your mid and upper back, it's putting you at significant risk, and you might want to avoid that. Now, taking those things into consideration, I do think the exercise is very beneficial. It is very good at strengthening the low back, and also probably helping your hamstring flexibility to a certain degree, and also strengthening your hamstrings. So, and what I'm going to show is the seated good morning. And it's an exercise that I think a long time ago it was used more often. It's really kind of faded away, and you don't see very many people do it. I was actually listening to a video the other day that really caught my attention. It was, it's off Elite FTS. It was a table talk with, it's the newest one, table talk with Dave Tate and Laura Phelps. I cannot remember her current her new last name, but if you find that table talk, as they're going through it, and they're towards the end of it, they're talking about different things they would do to strengthen up different parts of the lift. And Laura brought up seated good mornings, and I was like, whoa, I haven't heard that mentioned in a long time. We used to utilize these when I was at UTEP. Coach Davis would have them in for freshmen, pretty much just for the freshman football players, the red shirts or the guys that were in that developmental group. We would do them with those guys. And I've done them myself, not all the time, but I've done them several times. So the thing with the seated good morning is you're going to have to fight to stay in proper position, because it's really easy, and you may see me do it. It's really easy to lose that posture in your back. That's why I throw these red flags out, or the cautions saying, if these things don't add up, don't do it. I still remember a video, you can probably look it up on YouTube. It's with Chuck Vogelpol doing good mornings, seated good mornings with, I believe it was 405, and just doing them like, I mean, he's fighting to do them, but it's kind of crazy how how easy they looked. And obviously it was difficult. You could tell it was difficult, but man, he was moving that weight well. But didn't look
you could see the rounding in his spine. Now this is someone that has extreme strength and can probably handle that. Rounding doesn't always have to be bad. I advise against it, but there's a lot of top level lifters that do it and almost intentionally. So, but I'm gonna show it. When I do this, I'm gonna take the bar out of the rack just like I would squat, but I'm standing over a bench. I'm gonna back up almost to the back uprights of the rack. I don't want to hit those, but I'm gonna be getting back there. My feet are gonna go almost as far as they can forward. I keep my toes on the floor. If you lift your toes off the floor and keep just your heel on the floor, you're gonna feel a lot more tension in your hamstring. But when I do that, I cannot get the range of motion that I need to get. So I keep my toes on the floor to allow a little bit more hamstring flexibility. And my goal is to put my chin or my nose on that bench, okay? That's sufficient range of motion. I'm gonna try to get my feet or my face basically on the bench. From there, I'm utilizing my hamstrings and my hips, and you're gonna feel your low back working quite a bit on this too, but really utilize your hamstrings and your hips to come back to that starting position, and then I'm ready to go back down. I think that's just about it, so let me get in here. Again, I'm gonna take the bar out just like I'm gonna squat, except my feet are gonna be a little bit wider to straddle the bench, and I'm gonna have my feet wide as I'm doing the exercise. From here, take the bar out. I'm still gonna pull the bar down tight on this. Probably not gonna be able to crunch my abs down very well. I have a seat on the bench. I move my feet up and my feet are out wide with my toes out just a little bit. From here, I'm leaning forward, all right? I'm not just trying to bend forward at my back, I'm trying to lean forward from my hips. I'm gonna stretch forward, utilize my hips and hamstrings to come back up. Once I finish, I can stand back up, walk the bar into the rack. That's your seated good morning, okay? And you can also do this, and you probably saw me a little bit really trying to get down there, and I flexed my upper back a little bit. You want to try to avoid that as much as possible, and just keep your back stiff and reach forward, getting that face down to the bench. But you do want to get significant or good range of motion. If you can't get to the bench, don't fight it, all right? Don't try to fight it and go further than what you can actually get to. You may develop flexibility over time doing these, so maybe just a little bit at a time. Every set, try to go just, not even every rep, just every set, try to go a little bit further. The next time you do it, the next week or whatever, try to get just a little bit further. Generally, my first time doing them, if I haven't done them in a while, I struggle to get range of motion. And then the next week, I'm better. And then the third week, I'm getting down there without any issues. So your flexibility will develop over time. Don't rush it. Also on the seated good morning, you can throw that safety squat bar in there just as well as a straight bar, okay? And it'll add the difficulty to the lift, makes it a very good exercise. I've actually done it where I hooked the band up to the front of the rack, okay? Not kind of down low, but definitely forwards. Had it hooked to the bar, the safety squat bar, and then as I did my good mornings, it's pulling me forward. So I'm having to pull against that band tension coming back. Just another variation. There are certainly more variations of good mornings. This is not an exhaustive list, but these are some of the basics that you can get down. I'm going to get more into that in just a minute. That's it as far as the variations. Give me just a second. I'm going to stop the video for a second. I'm going to come back. I'm going to go over some programming tips and how to apply good mornings to your training. All right, so that's the good morning. Okay, there's not a super complex exercise. It is an exercise. If you don't focus on some of the details, things can go wrong. But if you focus on doing it correctly, I think the injury risk is actually pretty low. In fact, me personally, I don't remember ever seeing someone get hurt doing good mornings. Now, provided whenever I was coaching at the college level, I coached them up first before they ever did it. And it doesn't mean everyone did it perfectly the first time they did it, but I started them light, okay? Meaning with a female athlete, I'm starting them with the bar, and I coached them constantly on how to do it. And I gave them an introduction before they ever touched the bar doing good mornings on how to do it properly. So, but once you get that, learn how to lock your spine in, lock your back in, work from the hips, not the back, work from the hips and the hamstrings. Once you understand how to perform those concepts, I think the injury risk is pretty low. For athletes, and I'm talking track and field athletes, football players, baseball players, volleyball players, basketball players, and there's a whole lot of other sports, soccer. They can all benefit from the good morning because it is a posterior chain developer. But when I'm training them, I'm not going to train in the same manner as a power lifter, a weightlifter, or a strongman athlete, or a CrossFit athlete. My first priority is for them to do it correctly. Then I'm going to start light. I'm not going to do exhaustive sets, okay? Start with sets of 10 that they could probably do 15 with, and maybe even more than that, and make sure they're doing it correctly. As time goes on, you can add weight. For your freshmen and sophomores, I would be cautious to overdo it too soon. Okay? Why? They don't understand how to utilize their body under load. They don't have the requisite strength in their abs, in their obliques, in their lats, in their traps, to stabilize their spine from their neck down to their hips. Okay? Therefore, they can easily get out of position and something can go wrong. So just take your time with it. Start light, teach them to do it, and they will get a lot out of it from teaching them their body to work from a hip extension standpoint, meaning they're utilizing their hamstrings and their glutes to extend their hips. Okay? They will get a lot out of it with even submaximal weights. So keep it submaximal. As time goes on, meaning that you're getting into their junior, senior, maybe even a fifth year, then you can start thinking add more weight. Okay? And you can start adding weight prior to that. You just need to do it conservatively. As they get better at strength-wise in the posterior chain, as well as the abs, as they get better at the movement, thinking long-term, as they become juniors and seniors, you can start pushing them and challenging them with heavier weights, okay, that are fairly heavy. I wouldn't take it to a 5-rep max if you're doing sets of 5, but definitely a heavy, somewhat hard set of 5 will do them very good. Moving on to, and I generally would rotate this in with RDLs. So, and I do RDLs first. They learn how to do RDLs. Then teaching them good morning really isn't that hard because they already have an understanding of how to do the movement. Moving on now to strength athletes. There isn't a strength athlete that I can think of that can't benefit significantly from the good morning. Powerlifters definitely should be doing good mornings. Strongmen, they are so posterior chain oriented with all the lifting events that they have, where they're lifting stones from the ground, where they're even the carries, where they have to pick the implement up first, the deadlifts that they have to do. Definitely strongmen can benefit from good mornings. Weightlifters, posterior chain, and really I think this probably caught on in weightlifting circles before it got to the powerlifting and strongman. But weightlifters definitely could get to benefit from good mornings. And thinking more about getting stronger with good mornings versus just training through that full range of motion, trying to get down perfectly parallel. And weightlifters generally have good flexibility, but they need to challenge the strength aspect of these lifts where they're getting to heavy sets of 5, heavy triples, much like powerlifters do, to really strengthen that posterior chain. Now, there are different ways to apply it. I know it's been talked about that 70% of max effort workouts should be good morning variations. I think that's a bit extreme because it's cutting out the squat and the deadlift. You're only getting 30% of your max effort work in those squat and deadlift. That's probably not enough. From a technical standpoint and the technical acquisition standpoint, I wouldn't do good mornings that frequently. I would move good mornings more to a second exercise, a supplemental exercise. So I would squat first, then I would do good mornings. And generally, I want my good mornings to be on the heavier side. So I'm not really going to push them for sets of 15 to develop a lot of hypertrophy. I will go up to 10s, but generally speaking, 8s to 5s, and trying to get heavy with that. Triples occasionally, heavy, very heavy triples. And really working at that definitely in the 5 to 6 rep range, really trying to put a lot of emphasis on my hamstrings and glutes by doing that. Now, here's the thing. I once heard a 900-pound squatter say that when he started doing good mornings, that he was told to utilize 135. Do it with perfect technique with the intent to get as much out of it as if it was 700 pounds. And I'm just making the 700 up. But to get as much out of 135 as he could before he started progressing weights. Do a set of 10 with 135. Focus on your hamstrings. Focus on your glutes. Being in perfect position and bleeding that thing to death. Just getting as absolutely much as you can out of it before you start to progress. I think that's good advice. Maybe it's a bit of overkill. I mean, we're talking a 900-pound squatter utilizing 135. But we need to take those words to heart and that we want to get as much out of it as possible versus just seeking bigger numbers. Okay? Focus on doing it absolutely right. Getting the range of motion that you need to get. Getting your hips in the proper position. Learning to rotate your hips to come back up. Okay? Rotate back, rotate forward. Rotate your hips forward to come up. Not trying to overarch your spine. You're trying to do the work with your hips and your hamstrings. And that is very key to getting as much of you as you can out of the good morning. But focus on those details. Every bit of it, from the setup all the way to the execution, to racking the bar at the end. Focus on the details of putting yourself in the proper position every single time and utilizing the muscles that you want to utilize to do the exercise. Okay? Hopefully that's making sense, because I think I'm going to have a hard time explaining it any better. I'm not sure I'm 100% clear, but we're trying to get as much out of it as we can with as minimal, taking the emphasis off the numbers. Certainly, you will add weight if you need to add weight, but don't sacrifice the technical execution of the movement just to put more weight on the bar. Don't start cutting your range of motion short. Don't start losing the position of your spine. Don't stop rotating your hips. Make sure you're doing all those things correctly, no matter what weight is on the bar. If you put more weight on the bar and you can't do those things, then take the weight back off until you can do it solidly every time. Then you can go up. That is it. Please leave comments, leave feedback down in the comments, ask questions. If there's something I didn't cover, may have done it intentionally, may not, but ask questions. Let me know any comments you guys have, any feedback you have, let me know. Until next time, always be in the pursuit of strength.